The year is 1830. Across the dusty bazaars of Kabul, whispers travel faster than caravans. In the crowded streets, veiled strangers trade not spices, but secrets. Disguised explorers move under false names, holy men carry forged maps, and tribal chieftains accept bags of silver from men they've never met before. They call it Shatranj-i-Kabir in Persian, the Great Game. It was not a game of dice. It was a game of empires. The players, the British Empire and the Russian Empire. The prize, Central Asia, a land of deserts, mountains, and kingdoms that neither side fully understood, but both believed they needed to control. And in the shadows, spies, explorers, and double agents shaped the fate of millions without anyone ever knowing their names. The Great Game began with fear. In the early 19th century, Britain ruled India, the jewel in the crown of its empire. Its ports fed the British economy, its resources enriched London, and its markets sustained global trade. But Britain-Dias rulers were haunted by a nightmare. What if another power invaded India from the north? That other power was Russia. For decades, the Tsars had been expanding southward, conquering Kazakhstan, Bukhara, and Khiva. To British strategists in Calcutta, every Russian move looked like the first step of a march toward India. Britain's fear turned into obsession. The mountains of Afghanistan, the deserts of Persia, the passes of Tibet, all became pieces on an invisible chessboard. This was the beginning of a century-long struggle where maps were weapons, rumors were armies, and secrets were more valuable than gold. To understand the Great Game, you must understand the land over which it was fought. Stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Himalayas, Central Asia was a crossroads of civilizations. The old Silk Road still pulsed with trade, ideas, and ambition. At its heart lay Afghanistan, a mountainous fortress whose tribes were fiercely independent. To the west lay Persia, modern-day Iran, weak and divided but strategically vital. To the east, the vast mountains of Tibet acted as a natural barrier, hiding secrets Britain desperately wanted to uncover. And between all this were the ancient Khanates, Bukhara, Khiva, and Samarkand, each ruled by emirs and khans with their own shifting loyalties. For Russia, control of these regions meant access to warm water ports and a path toward global trade dominance. For Britain, losing them meant putting India's gates in enemy hands. Neither empire could allow the other to win. While armies prepared, the real war was fought by men with no uniforms. They were explorers, linguists, traders, holy men. At least that's what their papers claimed. In truth, they were spies, moving across deserts and mountains where a wrong word could mean death. One of the most famous was Alexander Bokhara Burnes, a young Scottish officer. Disguised as an Afghan merchant, Burnes traveled deep into Central Asia, drawing maps, gathering intelligence, and charming local rulers. His reports gave Britain its first accurate picture of Russian ambitions, but also convinced London that Afghanistan was the key to controlling the region. Then came Arthur Connolly, the man who actually coined the phrase, "the Great Game." He believed Britain could win hearts and minds by spreading influence through diplomacy rather than force. But Connolly's dream ended in tragedy. Captured in Bukhara, he was executed by order of the emir, his death a chilling reminder of the risks spies faced. On the Russian side stood figures like Jan Prosper Witkiewicz, a brilliant Polish officer in Tsarist service. He infiltrated Afghanistan, befriended tribal leaders, and nearly convinced Kabul to side with Russia before his mysterious death. These agents lived on the knife's edge, knowing a single betrayal could doom entire armies. By the late 1830s, British paranoia had peaked. Rumors swirled that Russia was plotting an invasion of India through Afghanistan. London decided to act, and in 1839, Britain launched the First Anglo-Afghan War. It began with confidence. British forces marched into Kabul, installed a puppet ruler, Shah Shuja, and declared victory. but they underestimated Afghanistan's fiercely independent tribes. In 1842, a single catastrophic event changed everything. As British troops retreated from Kabul through the frozen Khyber Pass, 16,000 soldiers and civilians were slaughtered by Afghan fighters. Only one survivor, Dr. William Bryden, stumbled into Jalalabad, half dead, to tell the tale. The British Empire had suffered one of its greatest humiliations, and in St. Petersburg, the Tsar smiled. But the game was far from over. While Britain licked its wounds, Russia pressed forward. Step by step, Tsarist forces captured Khiva, Bukhara, and Samarkand, bringing vast swathes of Central Asia under Russian control. By the 1870s, Russian railways crept ever closer to Afghanistan's borders. London panicked once more, fearing the Russian steamroller would soon descend upon India. This led to the Second Anglo-Afghan War in 1878. This time, Britain fought ruthlessly, forcing Afghanistan into a treaty that made it a buffer state, neither fully independent nor under Russian influence. For a brief moment, Britain believed it had checkmated Russia, but Russia was patient. By slowly consolidating control over Central Asia, it tightened the noose around India without ever firing a shot there. The Great Game was fought not just with armies, but with maps, money, and manipulation. Forged maps were used to mislead enemies. Coded letters carried intelligence across deserts. Tribal leaders were bribed with gold to secure alliances. Explorers disguised themselves as holy men to move undetected. Rumors were deliberately planted to spark revolts and destabilize rivals. This was espionage at its purest and deadliest. By the early 20th century, exhaustion set in. After nearly a century of intrigue, war, and manipulation, both Britain and Russia faced new threats. Germany was rising, and the Ottoman Empire was collapsing. In 1907, the two rivals signed the Anglo-Russian Convention, effectively ending the Great Game. Afghanistan became an official buffer state. Persia was divided into zones of influence, and Tibet was left largely isolated. But though the treaty ended the game, its consequences never faded. The borders drawn during the Great Game still shape modern conflicts. Afghanistan remains a battleground for influence. Central Asia is once again a stage for global powers, with Russia, China, and the US vying for dominance. And the Cold War itself echoed the Great Game. Another contest of spies, secrets, and shadows over the very same lands. The players have changed, but the board remains the same. In many ways, the Great Game never truly ended. For a century, the British Empire and the Russian Empire fought a war without declaring it. A war of secrets and shadows. A war where maps were weapons and words were bullets. And when the dust settled, neither side truly won. The mountains of Afghanistan still stand unconquered. The deserts of Central Asia remain restless. And the echoes of the Great Game can still be heard today, if you know where to listen.